Hello and welcome. Thanks, people, for coming. Episode 9 of TheoryForge here. Ready to have a good time? I'm ready to have a good time. I
I'm
think
ready
so.
to have a great
I,
time here.
I'm
Cheers, everybody.
I'm a
Hello.
little bit down because I just closed my Beyond Earth window, but I'll get back to my crack in a little bit. In the meantime, we got some EverQuest next to talk about. Felix, you got an idea about what we're talking about, right?
Yes, vaguely I do this week. You guys are familiar with the people on the show. We actually have 5 of us here this week because we didn't have a guest this week. So we're going to talk, I don't know if you guys can see the title, Changing in the Guard. We're going to talk about a few things changing in Landmark, some bigger things, some smaller things, but a lot of stuff going on. So uh, first off, I guess the big topic is that anybody knows that Dexella is going to be moving back a little bit into some bigger areas of SOE to handle marketing and that department a little bit more. So we're actually going to get Amaris in for Landmark and EverQuest Next. She's going to be the new community manager for both EverQuest Next and Landmark. So that's pretty interesting news. I know, especially for anybody who's been following from the beginning. She was there a little bit, but it's largely been just Dex has been the person we've interacted with, the whole community at large at most. So, what do you guys think about that? Anybody have any thoughts?
Well, it's kind of interesting because Dexella was the one who gave the name Landmark to the game. She was the one that suggested the name Landmark, and that's why the character, the female character that they use for the marketing stuff, is named after her. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Then again, the Onod's still in the game, so it's things that it's history of the game sort of stuff.
Well, I'm excited just to see what kind of new ideas she's going to be bringing to the table. And as far as Dexella moving to the different position, I mean, I've really enjoyed watching her on Landmark Live. She's very charismatic, and she seems to know what the community wants, and does a great job of dealing with the community as far as the things that I think most of us would shake our heads and maybe smack our desks about. But she does a great job, and I'm looking forward to hearing and learning about Tiff. So.
Yeah, I've got to know her a while back, really when Nexus started up, kind of interacting with interviews and other stuff. It's I think one of the interesting parts of them being so open is actually just even seeing people kind of go up the chain and get promoted. She's been nothing but great to work with. So they'll losing a good person for that role, but getting another good one in. So we'll see how it goes.
Do we want to throw her Twitter in the chat here? I forget what's her name. It's Tiff. What's her SOE name?
Kinda Tiffy is her Twitter name, but it's Amneris is her SOE forum name, and she's been around. She's not really a new face to all of this. I think it's probably the right time for a change anyway. That Dex did a pretty good job getting through alpha and through the majority of beta. That now we're starting. It's a good time for that fresh start and ramping up into actually thinking about launching the game instead of managing a beta community, which is what we've been part of for a long time.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, for anybody that's been playing, EverQuest from a long time ago, I think we've been pretty spoiled as far as, community managers. I can't really think off the top of my head of any times I've, had a bad experience with Sony's customer service, and their community people have been great. So I'm pretty excited. She's got a lot of experience, has been, with the company for a while, so it'll be interesting to see what she brings to the table. I'm pretty excited.
It'll also be interesting to see the changes that I guess we can kind of anticipate, the rumors being for example, it's not even the rumors, what was stated was Omid said that he had these kind of community-driven ideas for, and please somebody correct me if I'm misspeaking, but the community-driven ideas for keeping the community involved, and SOE kind of wanted to start to break away from that mindset. That's what I heard in the forums. That's what I saw in the post that Omid had put out.
From what I recall, his approach is more just community-driven marketing.
Right. So I'm interested to see how, if that's what they were kind of, gearing towards or doing before. I'm interested to see what is going to start to develop and unroll now that we have new people in different positions and how they'll go about that. I don't know what the changes will be like, but it should be interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that I've been thinking. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I just want to say real quick. It's something that I've been wondering about because we now have the new brand manager for EverQuest Next and Landmark. So it almost seemed like not necessarily they wanted to switch out the community managers, but like you were saying, if there was a time to do it, this would be a time to do it.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties in, with not so much as bringing a new community manager into EverQuest Next and Landmark, but taking Dexella, who was familiar with what they were doing before, and carrying, the kind of format that we've been experiencing in Landmark so far, the community, on towards the marketing side, if they want to keep that, community-driven marketing stuff going on. So that's probably the big takeaway for me. Like, I'm interested to see how Dexel is going to add some of that community infusion into the marketing, because like you guys said with Omid, that's was his style, and that's kind of what it seemed like Sony wants to promote. So it'll be interesting to see like that new infusion and see how different things we've done and experienced carry on into maybe a bigger scheme of their marketing approach. So
One of the interesting things to note in the post that was, kind of presenting this new change, Amaris actually says, "What's the first thing I should build?" So, definitely hit that post. I'll find the link for it here for you folks, and give your suggestions.
speaking of suggestions, this past week we had the everybody may be familiar, should be familiar with the ogre versus dwarves poll, and the the third failure by the dwarves this time around, I
Yep.
believe. Yeah, the dwarves have fallen 3 times now. So
Night Elf, it was Night Elf, Karen, and then now ogres.
yeah, so that's kind of a big topic, because I mean, for anybody who's been following the workshops as they've gone, the Dark Elf workshop lasted about 2 months, pretty much about 2 full months, and then we moved into the Karen workshop, and we had SOE live in the middle of it. But the Karen workshop went on for 3 full months. I mean, there was, I believe, I counted when I did my guide the other day, there was like 11 episodes of the workshop show on the Karens. So that was a big chunk of time, and that was a big focus. Everybody's been building Karen stuff for a long time, and now we're finally getting a new race, and I think it's gonna be pretty exciting, because the ogres. This is something I wanted to bring up, and I want to hear everybody's thoughts on it. But it's kind of significant that the dwarves are such a favored race, of EQ fans and fantasy fans, and yet they keep failing to win the polls, be it chance or whatever. I'm just kind of wondering what everybody's thoughts, maybe why the dwarves keep coming up short. Gosh, that was a terrible thought. Not really succeeding and beating out all the other races. And my initial thought is kind of that, it's they haven't really shown us anything new on the other, on the dwarves, whereas the other races have been pretty controversial so far. So what do you guys think? Let's start with Tsagh down, and we'll work our way around.
I think the system's bad. That's my answer for everything, isn't it? That we'll blame the system. It has nothing to do with like what people want. It's not that the dwarves are losing anything. It's not that there's this real battle out there. It's not that anyone's undermining the whole process. It's just that the number of people that are voting keeps shrinking. The number of people actively building keeps shrinking, and people just click on buttons because they think it's interesting to click on a button, not because they care. And it has nothing to do with what people really want to build. It has more to do with it's just a funny experiment on what button people will click. I don't think that there's validity to the entire thing. It's not saying that people aren't interested in dwarves as much as they're interested in other things. It's just the way that social groups react to these kinds of choices, and the way that the conversation goes and the way that it bounces around, it has nothing to do with what the choices are. It has to do with how people feel connected or disconnected to the whole situation.
Looks like
Okay.
Nero's having a spiritual,
Yeah,
like a out of
yeah,
body
no,
experience.
no. This is something that I've been thinking about over the past week, and it actually really plays into the conversation really well right here. I actually had the idea for the next one to swap the actual results. So when the poll goes, it's going to show if you vote for the one that isn't dwarf, your vote goes to dwarf, and if your vote goes to dwarf, it goes to the other one. And that's just a visual thing. When everything gets tallied up, the things that you actually voted for get represented. But the idea is to kind of try to throw people off and see if people will, go into a panic. It's like, holy crap, dwarves are winning. We got to do something about it. And the more people pile on, the more dwarves get the votes. Just as a silly sort of experiment. And that would be something that kind of plays into the idea of trying to see if it really is just random button clicking, or if people are actually doing this as a calculated sort of thing.
What
I mean, do we know how
percent?
secure this is? Like, is there? I mean, obviously, I would imagine that SOE has some sort of tight knit way of making sure that people aren't voting more than once. But we have some pretty tech savvy people out there. Do we think that there are people who are able to, just spam votes for something that they particularly want?
People
It
are
seems to
able
me.
to do that. Whether they're doing it or not, I don't know. There are people with the talent to be able to break the online voting system. But a different question is, what percentage of the people voting are connected to the process other than knowing that there's a vote?
Sure,
Like,
that's a good
I have
point.
never watched a workshop show because that's like the part of the whole process that I'm least interested in.
Yeah,
It's not important to me. I didn't vote, but how many people are less connected than I am? But every time they vote, who's voting that's really taking part? And
This is yeah.
that's what I
I
don't know.
I
This is
think
like a
that
bigger thing
the
to look at, though. It's more than just the voting. Like we can go on the forums and straight up see most of the people who will complain in game or complain about the systems in the game on YouTube videos on the forums. They don't even like. I doubt. It's not that I know for a fact, but I doubt that that Landmark even has half that amount of people inside of the game. So I bet these are, they're just people who are either trolling or, and we see that everywhere, not just the voting, but on the forums and people complaining and bitching. I'm sorry, and complaining about different things on the forums and also on the YouTube videos. Like it's definitely. It's definitely something that we see in more than just this particular voting scenario.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a lot. The fact that changes it a lot is that, yes, they posted in the forums the poll and people vote there, but the fact that they posted on the main page, the main EverQuest page, means that anybody that happens to be checking back in on EverQuest next during that week is probably going to see the poll and vote, and they may have like no idea what the workshop even is or what's going on. So, but that's a good thing because it does, like, for people that do just happen to be checking back in, they might not have known about it if they last checked like 6 months ago or something, and now they know about the workshop and they can go dig into it. But at the same time, the people who are building, I think, the people who are actually building don't really, get a choice on what they're going to be building. Like, you get two options, but I think there's a large portion of votes coming from outside Landmark, outside the building community especially. Because like me, I can't remember, it's been at least a month or two since I built anything, and I go vote on it just because I want to see a specific. And this is the thing that I was bringing up before, is like the reason I've been voting for certain races has nothing to do with building whatsoever. I vote on a race because when I look through the lore and when I look through the other resources, like whatever race has the most holes, or whatever the one I know the least about, I want to know more about. So I just vote for the one I know the least about in this game. And we don't actually know a lot about the dwarves in this game, but they haven't shown us anything that's markedly different than past iterations of dwarves in EverQuest. So Whereas, with the ogres, we know they're drastically different. They're not big, dumb, and stupid anymore. There's a lot of big different changes about them that sparked, minor, outcries in the community for people that love the old big, dumb ogres and stuff like that. But, it was kind of a controversy, which I think sparked votes because people are like, well, let's see what they're going to do with them. So that's kind of the way I see all these polls going. I don't really think, workshop builders, yes, they're going to be able to influence it, but for the most part, I just see people, I don't know how many people are like me that vote like that. Like, I just want to see, more about the race I don't know about, or that is the one that looks the most interesting. So
That's sort of my take. When you ask that question, is that there's really, I don't think, anything new expected from dwarves. They've been in every, EverQuest 2. I mean, any fantasy RP, you're used to a certain type of structure or whatever you want to say with them. So I don't know that there's really a reason. The ogres, you don't really know much. There's a lot to look in and explore there, and that was sort of my take. But what I'll find interesting is that they put up dwarves again, and why do they keep pushing dwarves?
Well, it's something where they're not going to take a race down until it gets voted on. So it just so happens dwarves haven't been voted on. But let's say Ixar for some reason don't get voted on, like dwarves versus Ixar lose, and then they keep losing the next 3 or 4. That's how it's going to work. It's not dwarves because they're trying to push the issue. It's dwarves because they're just pushing the loser from the last week. That's all. Or the
But
last
they're making a conscious choice to do that. They have no pressure to keep with that system. They could change that anytime. It's just that they think it's funny. It's entertaining. It's entertaining to the team, and that's valuable. If the team is being entertained by these votes and it's helping to keep their morale up, I'm all for it.
The reality is, when you look through all of the stuff out there, people have for a while been building dwarven structures. It's not like they're not doing it.
Alpha.
There's a ton of them out there. So I don't know.
There's a really sexy one that's being built right now by, as far as I know, it's a group of people. But I saw it
there's
on
the entire Butcher Block Mountains. There's a whole area that people are working on. I took a tour of it last Sunday. It's pretty amazing, and this is just the start.
And so I guess I wanted to know, well, there's obviously the concept of when they give us a race here on this list, they're revealing one of the races that's going to be launched in EverQuest next. So that's maybe one reason why they would keep, one of the races on, because they want to kind of pace it out. And then another thing that I wanted to ask, like you guys, I mean, because this is based around building mostly right now, we're getting a little bit of the like lore, but most of it is just because we're learning about their architecture so that people can build these races. I mean, don't you think that really the people who should be voting on this is strictly the builders? And if you think that, maybe we should be looking at like a more specifically in-game or more like a way to vote that actually takes some effort, especially when it comes to building.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like, I just want to go back to something that you guys were talking about earlier as far as, like, dwarves, like, they just keep getting in there because, they're the race that lost, which I think is part of it. It's entertaining, it has the comedic value, but at the same time, I remember back before they did the very first poll, their reasoning for these 2 specific races was where we're at in the game now, these are the races that we need to get done first, which is what they said at the time, so that means they're probably working on, some dwarf stuff anyways, because I don't know, depending on how they're structuring the world, maybe it has to do with the lore or, runes underground or what systems they're developing, I'm not sure, but,
the big materials that we got, the big pile of materials was mostly dwarven themed.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because like whenever we pick these new races, they're having to kind of scramble to create textures for and props, whereas like with dwarves, we pretty much have the majority of everything you need for dwarves, stone, metal, of all different types. That's a dwarven playground. So, and a lot of the props too. I don't know if other people have noticed especially the crafting stations. Those seem like very dwarven style. They're not elvish. They're not, other than the sci-fi ones, but they all seem very dwarven. Seems like maybe they were just planning to do dwarves and they came up with the idea to do a vote, and now all of a sudden, like, everybody is not voting dwarves.
Yeah, I mean, we were joking about dwarves versus dwarfs on the Landmark Live show, and I could definitely see them doing something silly like that, like dwarves versus some other name for dwarves or some other race of dwarves that they've had in one of the games, and just like, well, it's going to be one or the other. You guys pick. But something else I want to kind of touch on. There's something that's really interesting with the races this time around. Two features. One is that no race is inherently good or evil. That's up to the actions and deeds of the players and the individuals within that society. I would say the same is true of intelligence and civilization. None of the races that we're going to be able to start as are crude, savage cultures. They're all going to be cultures that have an intelligence and education, lore and history of their own. Being organized and civilized. Now, how they're civilized and how other people are civilized, they might not agree that how they that the other one is civilized, but in terms of actually being intelligent and having class structure and that sort of stuff, that definitely is going to be a feature of all the races. So I don't think any of them are going to be stupid or I think that stupid sort of brutish thing is something they're going to leave for maybe non-player races initially. Yeah.
The idea of vetting, who votes, builders or everyone. I can see both sides. The only thing I would say as far as letting everyone, I mean, they are building for next, so I can see where people who aren't actually builders would want some sort of input.
But we're not voting for like the races in EverQuest next. We're simply voting for like what we're going to be what builders are going to be building for in Landmark. Like that's strictly what this is about right now. There's nothing. That's what I was saying because we're not getting like a backstory to the race that is picked. We're not getting like. We're not getting we're getting a little bit here and there, but it's mostly because we're getting the architectural foundations for these races. And I guess that's why, like, what I'm trying to figure out is like, besides that, what do we get?
We did actually get quite a bit of background on the Karens, to be honest.
But we got that from the book, I thought, right? That was from the...
No, that's one thing I was going to say. Like, that's why I voted Ogres, because, like, we got so much lore information from the Karen. Like, it's just crazy. Like, we got almost as much lore information on the Karens as any other race besides the Elves from the workshop. Even though, like, no, we didn't get any exact history, no exact events or anything that's in lore. We got the foundational information about the race just as much as is out there in the books on any other race except for the Elves. Like, it's even more. I'd say we know more about the Karens than we know about any other race except for the Elves.
Really what I'd say is they should just stop the voting process.
I completely agree that it doesn't... unless it's adding morale for people in the studio. If people in San Diego that are doing this, it's their job to be doing this, get a kick out of it, and they have little office battles or whatever it takes to keep office morale up. If that's the purpose, I don't want to take that away.
But it can be a tiebreaker too, because I mean, what if internally they're like, well, we should do this race next, we should do this. They're like, well, let's just let the fans decide, And also, it's that at the very least, it's at least an illusion of choice and input. Even though the people that are voting on that are probably are in EverQuest Next affecting it in no way, almost, by voting on that poll. Only the people actually building and participating in the workshop forums and in game are affecting it, but it gives everybody else, that might not be into Landmark whatsoever, because there are people out there. I know some people that, like a couple of my brothers have no interest whatsoever in Landmark at all. But they're huge EQ fans. They've been EQ fans since day one, and they'll come in, they'll check out the site every once in a while, and I'm sure, if they see the polls, they probably vote, even though I don't know, probably they don't even know what they're voting for. They just probably vote for the race they like the most. So, I mean,
because all we're really voting for is order. The order you're getting them, you're still going to get them. So, I mean,
there's value outside of. It's not a valuable way of choosing what to do for the workshop because it's completely irrelevant what is next. There is no value to being next. So because they're all going to come, it's all going to happen. It's really the value is in, if there is value, it's in people being entertained by the voting process, whether it's SOE employees or it's people or it's fans of EverQuest that feel like they're touching EverQuest Next with one click of a button, or whether it's people actually building and taking part in the workshop. It's an entertainment tool. It's not a decision making or opinion poll, or it's just that.
I could actually totally see where you're coming from and think that has to be about accurate. So,
Well, moving on from the actual poll itself, what are everyone's thoughts on the new? Well, I don't know. Let's go back. Since we haven't really, we've started this show prior to obviously, the workshop show getting started and all that. So, what are everyone's thoughts on the workshop? What do you think about how people have been using it so far? How it's been affecting EverQuest Next, and what are your thoughts on having a new race in there? Like, what kind of stuff do you guys want to see the community and the builders do? Because not all of us are builders. What do you guys want to see the builders do as far as these races are?
I said earlier, and I exaggerated, it isn't that I've never watched a workshop show. I have kind of lurked through workshop shows, and I don't value for entertainment the kinds of things that the good people who are very actively involved in it and get a lot out of it do. So I'm kind of lost, and I feel like outside of the conversation. It's like a whole bunch of people nerding out about something, and I just don't even understand it because it doesn't play into my personal talents, and it's not where my interest focus lies. I wish that there were another type of outlet for getting more EverQuest Next information, because I don't fit in well with artists, I feel like.
yep. Well, I don't know. I would agree with you, Tsagh. But I would say that I kind of have had similar feelings. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that I don't expect I kind of wish there was, the same way you said, but I wouldn't expect there to be, just because we see the process in which they're going through. We know their quote unquote blueprint, and we see the direction or in the time frame in which they're trying to head in certain directions. So I think it's just a matter of months before we really people who have different interests besides the building and the artistic side of the game will really start to be able to get involved in economy and maybe different kinds of art, even, or more micromanagement of different or story driven events or things like that. So probably I would say months, right?
I'd love to see how the open development process and the amazing things that we're seeing with the collaboration of the workshop do branch into things like story-driven content. Do you think they will run ideas by us? Do you think there will be like writing competitions for potential quest arcs? Do you think all these things?
Oh, hell yes.
They would be pretty interesting.
I would think so. I would feel like that's almost exactly what they've been building up with the whole concept of having the building, the architectural building kind of foundational competitions, and then eventually they'll start, as they add more things into it, they'll start incorporating more events. Although we haven't seen any really SOE driven PvP events. So want to believe that they would. Maybe they won't. I don't know.
I think Throck has it pretty good here. He said the storytellers will come back once they get story bricks in, and that was kind of a response to what Tsagh was saying about the being able to write story arcs and stuff. That's definitely something that I'm really excited for, and that's probably what my Landmark Daily show is going to become, is just story bricks and working on that sort of stuff.
I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted about this because, you guys know me. I'm big on lore and everything. And from everything I've gotten out of it, like I know they want to do this kind of stuff in the future. And I add those last words on in the future because from everything I've gotten from talking to different authors and talking to Steve Denuser and seeing the lore, picture play out is that we've got they have a very specific goal, a very specific setting and sequence of events that's going to happen prior to, day one of us being in game. They have this, it's almost like their secret right now that, all the lore people are trying to figure out, like, what happens right before we go, because they, just talking to the developers at SOE Live, Jeff Butler and Steve Denuser, they would get up to this point, because we're asking them about the current lore, and they're like, we can't tell you this yet, and it just comes off as this really big thing, an epic thing that's going to make everybody feel like, wow, I want to be a part of this epic adventure. So I see this type of stuff, the story bricks, we're going to get to play with it in Landmark, and we're going to get to do, everything they can do in EverQuest Next at some point, that's their goal. But I don't see us, prior to EverQuest Next launching, I don't see us having any input as far as story, or anything like that. Like, I do see the, possibility that there can be writing contests and, maybe story bricks, like, I don't know what they would call that, a coding contest, or, like a storytelling contest where people are creating
interaction modules, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that happening for, future stuff when they go to do future content, or, maybe, I know with past EverQuest, they've had, like, player design missions and quests, like, doing rallying calls that are maybe designed by, like, the server votes, or, like, the whole community votes, and they're like, okay, we're going to implement a new rallying call, and people get to have competitions for designing elements of it. So, I could see that, but I mean, as far as us getting workshop style, actual influence on EverQuest Next prior to launch, outside of just the building, I don't know where it could come from. I mean, I don't want to be like a pessimistic person, but like as far as the story goes, like it seems like there's not a lot of wiggle room for us unless it's at the smallest level, like designing a simple NPC and they kind of give us, the basics of what that has to be, and then
I could see that being a founder's pack item. That's something, though, I'm thinking that we're going to be able to use Storybricks to design a lot of the interactions, like full-on dungeons, story arcs, and everything that aren't part of the, the main storyline, but it's things that are associated that we can do, or maybe things that are completely unassociated that is just kind of procedural, awesomeness. You at some point you come across it somewhere in the world, and it puts you into one of many other branching story arcs or other parts of it. There's a lot of ways it could go. It really depends on how complex the tools they're going to give us are going to be, but I'm hoping it's going to be something where even in Landmark we'll be able to basically make an entire island, an entire kind of story-based area where every build on there has some significance and things you can interact with.
In regards to the workshop as it is, I honestly have no opinion one way or the other, and that's largely because I'm not a builder. I don't have much to say about it. It's on at a time. I can't watch it. Hopefully one day there's more to do with it. There's just, again, it's a systems limitation right now. They just don't have enough in to do anything other than building. So,
do you think? Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, do you think that the change of time for the workshop show to go from being after the Landmark live show to being the next day earlier on, do you think that was a good thing? Do you think it helped with the numbers? Do you think it helped with their ability to spread the word? Because for me, it's made it so I really can't watch it. I actually have a show at that time already, so unfortunately I tend to miss them and have to watch them afterward.
It's probably dropped numbers is what I would assume.
Yeah, I popped in for my first one in a while just this week's one, and I think it's at a terrible time. I mean, the majority of people, it's just most people are working, is basically the best way to say it. And I don't know, I think it's at a bad time. I thought it was great right after Landmark Live, because then you had, not only did you have the people that are interested in the workshop there contributing, but you had people that had extra time that day and they're just hanging out later to see some developer input and see stuff, and they would find out more about the races. They would find out more about builders or ways that they could help. Like, they'd see builds people are working on and be like, oh, maybe I can contact that guy in game and help him, harvest, give him a bunch, all kinds of opportunity. And I think changing that was not a good move. I mean, I don't know why they did it, if it was for their own scheduling purposes or what, but I don't think it was a good move as far as like getting the most out of the workshop. But that's just my take on it.
I think it's nice that they're starting to involve the community a bit more in the workshop, though. That's definitely a nice touch. It was actually kind of striking to me when I talked to Rosie Rappaport at SOE Live this year, and she hadn't even heard of the show Castles and Crap Shacks, which is basically a show that's essentially the kind of community version of the workshop.
Yeah, that's definitely odd that, I'm glad too though that, Landmark Live, I'm so glad about that change. I don't know if we want to talk about that topic, but having Landmark Live change to this 2-week format where you've got, 1 week for the patch and the update, and it kind of fixes their schedule a lot as far as not rushing every week. They get to plan things, get bigger updates in, and refine things better for each patch. But then you've got the other week, like Neuro's saying, where you've got, the community focus, and we're able to, it adds something for other people that want to be involved in the community and may not know where to go. You get to see different events that are going on. You get to see different things that are happening. And I think that was a great move. I still think they definitely should have the workshop show, follow it up somehow, or at least put it in a post-work, like closer to prime time, 4 p.m., kind of like Landmark Live at least on another day. I don't know, but what is everyone else's thoughts on the new Landmark Live format?
Well, going back to the workshop time, and the way that Neuro phrased the question kind of implied that more people and higher viewership was a win for them. And I don't think that I don't think that the reason for I think the reason for the change was actually to get away from just having masses of people experiencing it and to find a way to fit better with their schedule in the office to make sure that they could have a real focus group. And I think the workshop is about really collaborating, not managing a chaotic 800-person chat channel. And whether from a Twitch streamer standpoint, the numbers could be down significantly, but from a value that they're getting out of the entire experience at SOE, I could see they're having a group of people really getting together that care and want to be a part of it at that time and really making time. I can see that being a positive. When things are on isn't that important to me. I can find ways to watch or be part of whatever I need to, and I prioritize other things higher than that a lot of times. But I don't think it was bad. I think what was worse is trying to hold a focus group with real results and filter out good questions with a mass of people who are just hanging out in Landmark Live and trolling the chat. And Landmark Live is fine. It doesn't matter how many people are there because they don't interact with the chat. It's not an interactive show. There's actually no value for it to be on Twitch. It could just be on YouTube because they answer questions from Twitter. They answer questions that they have lined up ahead of time. It's not an interactive experience. There's not it. All it does is it's a way. The value of it being on Twitch is it's a meeting point for other people who just, hey, I know that guy in chat. But apart from that, that's where they're different though. That the workshop is perfect for Twitch because they can interact. They can have a personal connection with people on the other end and actually get things done. With Landmark Live, it doesn't matter. Remember when there were 5,000 people watching Landmark Live?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point.
Months ago.
That really
Yeah,
sounds solid.
yeah, that was pretty great counter argument. Because I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. You know, back when the days when it was 3,000 plus people on Landmark Live, like I would come in the first 15 minutes and say hi to the people, and then it would start getting too many people that I was interacting with, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to lurk mode, and I just don't say anything for the entire show until afterwards. So, you know, bringing up that difference in one being interactive and one not, and the workshop show, like you said, you know, the purpose of it being to interact with the builders that are contributing and getting them on the right track to help make progress in the direction they want to go, because they have a specific art style that they want. You know, we're putting input into it, but they have a very specific goal they want, you know, to achieve. So I think that those were great points made for that. So I'm less hating the time change now, but I do hate that I have to like see the replays and I can't talk with people while it's going because I can never make it.
And I think that what makes it, the time isn't exactly what brings it those great qualities. What it is the fact that it's just separated. So maybe the happy medium is find a better time where more people have free time, but still make it something that's separated from Landmark Live.
Yeah, I watch Neuro's live feature rant reruns a lot. I'm not always there for the show, but I watch it most weeks. I watch the rerun. And I get that feeling like Felix is saying, where like, where's my chat? How do I? Come on, I've got to say something about that. And I know Diggs does that with this show sometimes, because the next day we're getting Twitter messages like replying
Yeah.
in time to what's going on this. I could see, but Tenma is right. I think agree with Tenma here that the workshop is much more interactive than Landmark Live.
It's interacting with things that are actually in the game, where Landmark Live is a lot of times talking more about the process of things, where things are at, developing new features, and maybe doing a little demo of a new building technique, or at least something that the team wants to just show off because it's new to them or it's relevant or something. But yeah, definitely actually showing people's builds. It's a really nice sort of thing, being able to give specific feedback, because it doesn't just help that builder, it helps all of the builders who are, even if they're not doing something in that style, we all learn from it. We all kind of get our own ideas from it. That's one of the things that content and creations and Castles and Craft Decks before it was really successful for. A lot of people would tune in and build while they were watching because they would get a lot of inspiration for all the different stuff that we would see.
And hopefully, the fact that they are going out and kind of more officially or more publicly looking at these builds, maybe it'll also push them to see what through the community's eyes while they're chatting or while they're talking and putting stuff into the chat, and that might influence more things like new props that we want, or maybe influence the way that Sony makes decisions, because they're live, while they're viewing people's builds while being able to get feedback immediately about those builds, and then, like you just said, give feedback back to the community. That might be changing the content that we're getting.
Yeah, I mean, following the workshop show, even though I haven't been able to, be there for all of them, I've watched the majority of them, except for baby mode. I missed probably like 4 or 5. I've got to catch up on, and I will, because there's so much lore. I love them. Like, I love them because you get to see, especially when they have Steve Denuser there, or any additional third guest, that gets to give you the extra input. Because while they're doing the things and it's focused on the building, they give you so much about what their goal is for the game, like what they want the experience to be like for the players, which I think is huge. I think that's cool to share with the players, because it's so early on, it's still far away, but giving us a little glimpse, keeps us appeased, I guess, while we're waiting, because this was like, because of the format they want to do with this, player collaborative, community thing, they gave this information to us way early. Like, I think earlier than I've ever heard about a game launching from when it was actually ready to be somewhat playable. So I think that's important. It's super important for us to have that, those little tidbits to keep us going.
And I think they're hilarious. I don't know, when we get Jeff and Morgard in one chat, like it's pretty great.
Yeah, I was watching the one just this past week. It was hilarious. Steve like literally said, we had a meeting for an hour before the show started. I told you not to say this, and you said this. It was funny to watch those guys work together.
You mentioned the time frame with the past workshops. Do you think that gives us any kind of ideas as far as how far out we still are from any kind of playable?
For
form?
EQ Next?
Yeah. Because we got
I think it's one of those things where we might have something playable before we've gone through all of the races and all of the workshops for them, or it might be something where they just start once they've got enough features in that they feel like the population's starting to come back and the community starting to increase at a steady pace, that they might just start doing 2 or 3 races at a time to increase the pace of things.
Two, also, I don't think it's going to be easy for us to use as a predictive measure anyways, because like they said, we're going to do each race for about a month each, and the Dark Elves was like 8 or 9 weeks. The Karen was like 11, 12 weeks or something like that, or more, I'm not sure. But like we don't really have this, it's really informal kind of. How long they spend on each race kind of just depends on the progress that's being made. I think like the Karen one seemed to last so long because it was so different. People were used to, doing their clean lines, and people in builders in Landmark used to trying to get all the artifacts out of things and make things pristine. And, the Karens, it's like, we want things to be messed up and organic. We need, we don't want you guys to have things symmetrical and all that. And I think it took, just from watching the first shows, it took the community kind of a little while to latch onto that as a whole of what they really wanted for the Karen. So, I mean, it's really just the way the process is. I don't think it's something we can really ever use to kind of decide where we're at, as far as how close we are to them having the game ready.
I guess that,
And I
it's
also,
kind of like, I guess what I was getting at was what you were just saying. They said a month, and that turns into 2. And,
I kind of always feel so torn internally of, where are they? Like, I feel like there's got to be like a secret workshop in SOE where they just are pumping out EQ Next content, or I'm thinking to myself, are they that transparent that everything that they're doing is immediately in front of us? And I don't know. Part of me says no. There's so much.
You
stuff
haven't
going
been on the tour? I figured you'd been on the tour. I've been on the. I've seen stuff I can't talk about.
Well, we all have, yeah. I mean, I've been on the tour and I've done the NDA stuff, but I still feel like. Do you remember there was when you're walking through, there's a part where it's like totally blocked off and nobody can, we can't. It's like a game development thing where you can't. They block off certain areas in a game development so that people can't go in, and I'm just saying that like I feel like there must be like a secret room with like 3 people where they're just like busting out EQN content. Now, I don't know if this is the case. I'm just saying
there was no such room. We saw everything.
Yeah. Well,
because I guess the other thing that makes me say that is because it was at SOE Live what they showed the Dark Elves, right? That's what they had showed us as far as, and at that point it had been with the workshop. It had been a couple of months, right? Because they had already shifted off, and I guess I was not really super impressed by how much they had at that point, considering how long they had spent on it already. As far as they didn't take us through some big tour of a city, but it just didn't seem like a lot had been done.
I have a conspiracy theory for everybody to see if this is great that it's TheoryForge, because so I was just going back and looking at the EverQuest Next channel, and I was watching the time lapse, some of the time lapse builds that are like a year old, and it dawned on me that like their desert is not the desert that we have. Ashfang is not the same as the desert we have in Landmark. It's different. The textures are different. If you look at the mountains in the background, they're way more rocky. They're way more realistic looking as far as like more defined. And I'm kind of wondering if, they've already actually kind of built a lot of the world and done the procedural generation things they needed for EverQuest Next the way they want it, and that in order to facilitate what they want to do with things like the workshop and these other, ways to get the community involved in the building and development process, if they had to actually take time to recode procedural algorithms for landmark islands to make them, being generic workplaces for us, because they said, like we've seen screenshots of other complete biomes, like the deciduous forest one. And if you look too in those time-lapse videos and like the heroic movement one, there's actually connected biomes in the background in the distance. You can see the jungle, like the Firot, next to the Ashfang, or maybe not, it's not the Firot, but you can see these different biomes that are next to each other. So, I'm wondering how much of the world is already built that's just waiting on us getting, the different races, all these different other elements, the story bricks and these things to come along and getting their physics and the engine the way they want it, because it seems like they have a lot of other content already done, textures that we're just not getting in Landmark for whatever reason, maybe because we don't need it. You don't need it to know about it because you don't need it. So, I don't know. I think there's a lot that we don't know that's behind closed doors ready.
Yeah.
As for time frame, I asked Dave Georgeson at SOE Live, I said, is this going, my question was, is this going to mark a time when we start regularly getting information about EverQuest Next? Just about getting information, not about when is the game coming. But is SOE Live like the beginning of like the ball starting rolling for getting closer to release or getting closer to alpha? And he said yes, but probably towards the end of the year, meaning that like SOE Live is the beginning of the year. So I think we'll have more information about what's feasible in another 4 or 5 months, I think. I'm thinking that January 31st / February 1st, the 1 year anniversary of Landmark, by then we'll have some kind of information saying, either, even if it's a trademark soon, it'll be
Founders packs.
Yeah, you can buy this, and it'll be available for you on or before a year from now. Like we did with, like I did with Landmark, and spent $100 New Year's Day, and was surprised when the game was available to me at the end of January. But I think that we'll start getting information then. I don't think we're gonna. I don't think that the workshop is in any way. I don't think that it's a good measuring stick for when people will be let into the development process, and we don't know with EverQuest Next. Once that opens up, if they'll say, well, we still have landmarks, so we can be testing some of the things kind of covertly, or under a different umbrella as we're tweaking them and as we're working them out. But I'm expecting it to be more of a traditional cycle with a not as open, not as long of, not a year and a half of alpha and beta with people coming and going and tons of feedback. I think it'll be much more traditional than that. And H1Z1 would be what I would cite as my reason for thinking that H1Z1, when they announced it, they thought they were going to do more of an open development. They thought they were going to get people in real early. And, they thought when they announced the game, they implied that within 30 days we were going to have our hands on a playable, test of this game. And it's been 6 months now.
Yeah, 30 days after that, they finally said, "Oh yeah, no, it's not 15 years after. We completely changed the story."
But they did that, but the point is they decided to not just open it up. They didn't say they're not opening it up for anybody to be part of testing the engine. You know,
Well, I think it's really different, and the reason is because with EverQuest Next, we have Landmark as this, whatever. People don't want to say it's the beta, and it isn't the beta for EverQuest Next, but a lot of those core fundamentals, sort of things that we're going to be looking to have inside of EverQuest Next are already developed or being developed inside of Landmark. So that the fact that we have this kind of ongoing process with Landmark, I think speeds up with EverQuest Next as opposed to H1Z1, which is kind of a whole new, its own game, like straight up. And but I do also agree with you in the sense that like I think it will be more traditional than H1Z1 because the fact of it will be more traditional than Landmark because Landmark has this sort of general MMO quote unquote, I'm doing the quote thing, sandbox feel to it where we don't have a direction necessarily, whereas EverQuest Next I think will be super directed in a sense in the kind of MMO that it'll be. So I think that'll be a big factor in the way that we'll have access to the betas.
I would say though H1Z1 is kind of a tech test for the World War II MMO they're going to do Sturm und Drang. So until they get far enough with H1Z1, that's still being shelved. But H1Z1 was kind of like, well, we want to improve some of the tech of the ForgeLight engine first before we approach this massive project. So a lot of what H1Z1 is doing that, but at the same time, of course, hitting on the zombie survival demographics that are hating life because all the games are mostly buggy, and really making a solid product. So it's been kind of an interesting experience with that because I think over the months of development when they first showed it to now, they came across the idea that no, we don't want to show something that's really, really too early. We want to make sure we've got a vertical slice of complete gameplay, so that way when people do come in, they don't want to leave. They all want to stay and just wait for more content rather than people coming in and leaving because some things are broken or not finished yet.
Yeah, Landmark definitely had that problem. So yeah, I think that they definitely will learn from Landmark about EverQuest Next in that sense.
The other thing is that in EverQuest Next, that they have a vision for what the game is going to be, and they don't need feedback on like what the core systems are. For Landmark, they need feedback on they need to know that I don't like the combat iteration, almost 100% don't like it. And they need to be more flexible to change it because it is this player-driven sandbox building world where those systems can be changed and they can become something different, and they need to be adjusted, and finding ways to make that work in the Landmark environment, it involves interacting with the players. But for EverQuest Next, they don't need, nor do they want, feedback on the fundamentals of their combat system. They decided some of this stuff 18 months ago, and they're still rolling with it as far as we know, and if they've changed their minds, they just haven't released it.
And that's something I wanted to ask you guys is do you think that a lot of the systems in play in Landmark, we get them for the first time, they kind of lay them out for us. Do you think that they are testing out what we want for Landmark, or do you think that they're just kind of generally testing the systems for bugs and for maybe more geared towards how will this work in EverQuest Next?
We're getting a lot of what we're going to be seeing in EverQuest Next from it, but in a sort of limited and different format. It's going to be the gear-based builds rather than skill and learning and that sort of stuff-based builds. We're not going to have a class system, but beyond that, I think a lot of the mechanics and the feel and the pacing and the timing, and especially the keyword system and how that's all going to function, is stuff that is going to translate over to EverQuest Next. Of course, the origin system, the class system, and the skill system that we're going to see specifically in EverQuest Next is going to be a bit of a different beast, but that doesn't mean that we won't potentially have ways to get something kind of close to it in Landmark or completely mimic it. They just need to be able to give us the tools and the features, and they've said that they will, that they're giving us all the tools they're using to make EverQuest Next. So hypothetically, we'll be able to rebuild some of the same functionality and modules in Landmark.
I think an important thing to remember too is that because EverQuest is so fundamental, or sorry, EverQuest Next is so fundamentally different of a game. You know, what the things that we're getting when we see, you know, the testing and when we're trying out combat, we're trying out all these things in Landmark. They're making those for EverQuest Next. Yes, you know, Landmark is going to be its own game. It's going to be its own unique, you know, thing. And the thing is, though, is like that. The franchise is EverQuest. Like, that's their baby. That's the horse that pulls the cart. I think I just heard Dave say that, you know, recently. That say, you know, it's the horse that pulls the cart. It was actually in an interview I was watching the other day, you know, from past SOE Live this year. But they're doing all this for EverQuest Next. They can always go back and change and modify things and adjust things to make sure Landmark is a good, complete game. But that's not their focus, you know, like Landmark will get its time, but right now they're testing these things for the purpose of getting the tech issues solved, the bugs, getting all these, you know, the feel, like Neuro was saying, the feel down for that. So that way they know that these things, when they go into EverQuest Next, people are going to enjoy them. And, you know, they won't need to, I don't know, I really think that, like, Landmark is EverQuest Next, like, open beta testing. You know, they're going to be able to test a lot of their server loads, a lot of their tech issues, their, you know, all these different things, people with different, you know, with different memory cards and different video adapters, and understanding who's having bugs and all this stuff. They're going to be testing all of this through Landmark, so that way when they get to where EverQuest Next is like almost right there, they can just have a closed beta, and then, you know, that way nobody really gets to see what's coming out yet, you know, besides what we've already seen. We're going to see a lot of it, you know, through Landmark doing the workshops. That way nobody gets to see all those details. That way it's super exciting when you first get in. And I really feel like EverQuest Next is going to be one of these weird games that just doesn't have an open beta, because we're like in an open beta, and I think they're going to have a, you know, a small set of people, a selective, you know, closed beta testing like traditional in the past that has worked well for them, and then they're just going to roll right into the launch client.
I think they're also going to be using all of the time between now and when we can first actually play EverQuest Next in our homes, that they're going to be working on all of the security and systems to prevent data miners from being able to ruin the game for everybody. That's one of the things they've talked about a lot. They really talked about it a lot at SOE Live 2013, not as much this year, but the data mining is something that they really have a lot of concerns with, and it's something that they want to try to do their absolute best to eliminate and minimize the ability for people to use it, not only to reveal content that shouldn't be revealed yet, as well as live in-game stuff where you can know what enemy has what item and just hunt down all the items that have the good stuff, or the enemies that have the good stuff rather. Because that was a lot of problems in a lot of games before. I actually knew somebody in WoW. I didn't even realize until I put it, you know, 2 and 2 together later, that, oh crap, that's why he was finding 3 epic items a day. He was data mining.
Yeah,
Well,
I've
that's
always-
where, go ahead, Phantom.
As I say, I would just always thought the Landmark is a testing ground, not just for them making sure everything's correct, but I think also just by giving us the tools, they get to discover things from us that they would never have known to do. I mean, just look at voxels. How many extra things they now get to build with that they wouldn't have known if not for the players. And I think you'll see stuff like that with the other systems too. You know, when you get more into combat, get story bricks, they're going to find, players will find things that they just didn't know could happen that will be useful to them.
They wouldn't have
interesting
known to
thought.
give us Roman vectors.
Right.
I think that story is not a lie, and I don't want that to be the case, but because of the deal that they have with Voxel Farm, that at the very beginning they said, we think we need these pieces to make what we want out of this game. We think we can make the game we want for Landmark to be, and we think we can make EverQuest Next if you give us these pieces. So that's what we're gonna buy. Throughout all of that time, roaming vectors existed. All of these things that we're playing with existed, and Miguel was working on refining and understood all of this to begin with. It wasn't that we're teaching like Voxel Farm how to make the engine. It's that it was a disconnect at the beginning between what it was showing SOE that really they needed to buy more of this engine. It was showing that as we're touching parts of what they didn't buy, more than
I think that makes sense.
That because Miguel has said that he has a individual voxel editor where you can move individual vertices. We could have that in Landmark. The question is, what does SOE want to translate into Landmark from what Voxel Farm can provide? What do they want to pay for? And then how do they want to wrap that with a UI to fit what they see as their ideal ease of use and power of tool system? It's not like we didn't my point is that it was really SOE learning something, not on either end. So we did everything we could with the system, and we didn't teach anyone that things were possible. We taught someone that they needed to look more deeply into something that they thought they could just throw into a game a little. It was more embracing of the whole thing and taking it further. And so it's not a lie that we made up techniques and we introduced new concepts. We introduced new concepts to the Landmark development team for what they decided that they wanted to put back into Landmark. We didn't introduce new concepts to the entire voxel system. Like, roaming vectors are part of the engine from the beginning.
I agree
that's what I was getting at,
100%. Oh, go ahead.
No, see, that's what I was getting. I wasn't implying that we somehow, help discover something new within the voxel engine. I'm just saying, as far as how they're using it.
Yeah,
they have a lot of extra eyes now, basically.
Yeah, I think Tsagh kind of nailed it on the head with, like the community's been creating, developing these techniques, but really they've been there. It's just that SOE didn't think they needed these at the time that they said, hey, let's make Landmark into an MMO and let people help us build EverQuest Next. They didn't think they'd need those. That's why I think when we were first talking about water early on, we were asking them, what are you going to do? And they're like, well, we're doing some stuff and we're talking with Voxel Farm, because they have two different things going on, because they're coding their own, and they're also at the same time, seeing what they can pull easily, from Voxel Farm for a fair, for amount that they can afford in their budget. So I think that's a big thing. Like, they're going to find out through this whole process what they need from Voxel Farm that they can get easily, and the rest they're going to have to just code themselves. And they obviously have confidence that they can code certain things, like the static water we got for the oceans. I believe that was all on the SOE side, and looks totally different from what you see in Miguel's videos at Voxel Farm. So there's going to be a lot of differences, because it's its own. They're almost like two separate entities right now. So even
we
though
always
they're
enter, but sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. I'll just me, interrupt me.
Yeah. Well, I was going to just say that we, just in general, just to put this out on the table, like, we always need to remember that just because something exists in Voxel Farm doesn't mean that Landmark goes out, buys it, and puts it in their game like that, right? We have to always account for the fact that it's Lightforge, right? Forge Light, sorry, brain fart. Forge Light is the engine that they need to kind of take this data, plug it into, so that Forge Light can then render the Voxel Farm information. So that's always something that we need to the people just in general need to know about how Voxel Farm connects with Landmark and EverQuest Next.
And also too, it's, for people unfamiliar, I'm not super familiar, but a video game is a soup of code. Like they have like Forge Light is the light, the lighting system coding. The terrain mapping and drawing is from Voxel Farm. Like there's a lot of different pieces. I think we kind of get into the idea that like a game engine is what everything runs on, but with PC games it's a little different. You merge a lot of different systems to where there is no system that runs this game. It's the game is the system, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Sorry. I think it's because it might be a bigger problem.
There's the engine that kind of runs everything, and then there's all of the modules and plugins and everything that enhance everything, that add all of the features to it. So it's kind of a complex thing. It's definitely not something that I would want to try to explain in 15 minutes, and it's definitely not something we should try to use the next 15 minutes for. But yes.
Well, I do have a question for you guys. Kind of talking about the beta stages of these games and how we can what we're going to see when we move forward. So, do you think that in Landmark it'll kind of be this public test realm for the things that'll eventually be released inside of EverQuest Next? Like, for example, before we get a new batch of NPCs inside of EverQuest Next for an expansion, and this is of course total theory and concepts, but let's say like the way that they do an expansion is they drop a bunch of NPCs into the world that are new with new lore and stuff. Do you think that we'll get those implemented inside of Landmark first, and we'll test them out, and then they'll put it in EverQuest Next, or do you think they will be totally separate?
No,
I think we might get the
That's
AI interactions and the Storybricks tools, if there's any new ones that they're adding that weren't there before, we might see those in Landmark first. But I'm pretty sure anything going into EverQuest Next is going to be part of the EverQuest Next test server system, and it's not going to actually be in Landmark.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're gonna see a path diverge. Right around the time that they're like EverQuest Next is here. We're gonna start closed beta. You're gonna see a total divergence where anything for Landmark generally is going to be, for Landmark, and it's separate, and the same with EverQuest Next. You might see similarities, like Neuro was saying, with, Storybricks elements, or they come up with an idea for a new keyword or a new resource that's more meta. They might, you'll see that in both games, but anything specific, like a race or lore or anything, it's going to be, two different paths.
And the Rock Morton brings up a great point, which is actually why I would think that this question is even on the table, and it's which game is better to break, Landmark or EverQuest Next, and that's kind of why I do totally agree with you guys in the sense that the systems will be implemented, like big systems should be in Landmark to make sure that it doesn't break, because Landmark doesn't have a straight up structure to it, but some of the story driven things we'll probably not see in Landmark.
It's probably better to break it in EverQuest Next because, if you're doing it on an EverQuest Next test server, it's much closer to the actual content in the client. EverQuest Next is going to be a modification of the Landmark iteration of the kind of voxel Forge Light engine, and it's not going to be the only game. They've said they're actually going to not only be supporting if players actually make an awesome enough game to make it a game of its own, but they will probably be making other voxel-based games, possibly a sci-fi one, somewhere down the road. So I think that it's going to be one of those things that once EverQuest Next starts kind of coming into its own, we'll see a lot of the features that go into it also going into Landmark, because a lot of things can be built there and put into EverQuest Next. But I think Landmark at that point is going to start to diverge. I think that might be actually where Dave Georgeson might even start to go more towards the Landmark side of things, and somebody else might be introduced to handle the EverQuest Next, because they're going to start being two separate products at that point, where right now they're kind of like joined at the hip in some sort of weird freaky way.
I agree with Neuro completely for, great reasons he brought up, but I was actually thinking for a different reason, that when we start getting to the point where Landmark is starting to get to its potential of being a really, build your own MMO within the game, and people have a lot of tools and systems they can use to collaborate and do really massive scale things, it would actually be better to break EverQuest Next than Landmark, because once you have that many people with that much creative power, if there's a broken element that goes in, it could be pretty insane compared to, a closed circuit system, so to speak, and not an open-ended one. Where, EverQuest Next will be open-ended, but, totally different ball games.
I think that with Landmark, because they can change anything and even create new pockets of different things all the time. Like, they could put up new servers and new islands with entire different skill and gear systems if they wanted to test something else. That there is no such thing as breaking Landmark, because it really is this something out of nothing world that, like, we ran around in Landmark for at least 2 weeks doing nothing but rubber banding, and
Good times.
and putting down cubes and being real proud of them,
Crap shacks.
they saying wow when we saw that someone actually had the smooth or the line tool. This is what I mean, that it's something out of nothing, and the path within Landmark itself is open for divergence at any time as well if they choose to.
Right.
And and with the way they've set it up, you can move from one to another. So when I'm on Liberation, I have a staff, a bow, and a sword. But if I go to some server that they haven't made yet, and it does incorporate some new things that they're testing out and new systems for progression and development, they can keep a lot of the core because they've already built that. Like, they're with the voxel engine being incorporated well, and the building and the destructibility, then taking and building new systems on top of that is much. It becomes very interesting, and that's why I've said from the beginning that the quality of Landmark and the enjoyment that I'll get out of Landmark will only go up as EverQuest Next comes out, and it's been out for a while, and as new projects start. That in the end, that we're gonna talk about EverQuest Next as the first one of those games that came out of Landmark. So it's gonna be like the Landmark world. That Landmark is going to be what is talked about for longer. There will always be an EverQuest franchise, but there could be EverQuest Next 2 with a whole new story and a whole new thing that still comes out of the Landmark project.
Prequel.
Hashtag MMVR.
Mm-hmm.
Be a totally different game. We do have our first question here. I don't know if it's our first actually, but Stoneglade asks, wouldn't it be cool if the moment you log into EverQuest Next, you choose your race and name and see a cinematic merge into a rallying call to build Kanos? That's when you choose your class, how to help the city, hunting, gathering. So I guess the question is basically like, would you guys like to see, as soon as you go in, you're in a cutscene that just goes, you're in a rallying call, day one.
But the question also asks, I think it's saying not only are you thrown into the game, but you don't pick your class by simply, selecting it off of a menu. You actually, it seems like he's saying that you pick you choose your class while you're in the game, which is also interesting.
Your starting class doesn't matter. You'll unlock the other 7 and then the other 4 tiers of each one after that. Like, it totally doesn't matter what your starting class is. Race probably means a lot more.
Yeah,
I'm not sure which episode it was, but I know we had an episode fairly recently, like 5 or 6, where we spent a good 30 minutes to an hour talking about starting. Well, I'll look that up for you, Stoneglade. But yeah, we have an episode that covers a ton of starting questions, and there was a whole hour dedicated to that. So it'll probably have a lot of interesting information for you in there and thoughts to plague your mind forever.
And we do. I mean, what we heard from SOE Live, Val, right? When we were told that basically we're on this ship being shipped over to I need the lore facts here. What's the name of the continent that we're being shipped to?
So the Antonica Amaryl, kind of, it's 2, but they're one area, kind of.
And so as we're arriving there, right? Like, is that do you think that we're starting out in a rallying call, or do you think that we're starting out in, like, I guess because I think that's a valid question.
I would say that, fundamentally, from a game mechanic standpoint, experiencing as the tutorial will be a version of a rallying call. It's going to be decision-making things that you do for... I mean, I guess it could be a little bit different because it's not actually permanently changing the world, but they did say that, Kinos is going to be able to grow depending on what the choices of the players are. So I could see Kinos being the, starting game rallying call that just constantly persists, and that's how you figure out what a rallying call is. That's how you figure out what your character does and what your row song is and how you gain classes or even choose a class. Maybe it happens in-game or maybe you choose one before. Either way, I see Kinos being kind of that rallying call introduction for players. So it's going to function, basically the same.
Well, on that note, I think it's about time for us to start wrapping up. I'm gonna start off with the closing remarks this time. 10 hours from now, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 a.m. Pacific Time, on this channel I will be beginning a 24-hour stream for Extra Life. We'll be raising money for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. For me, this really matters because, well, I have 2 kids. Raising money for a hospital where my daughter was born, and they subsequently saved her life. She nearly died from terrible stomach problems. She lost a whole bunch of weight and was kind of wasting away, ended up on a feeding tube for a while in July. And she's healthy now and just about starting to walk. And, if it weren't for these hospitals, a lot of people we know, we wouldn't know, because without these hospitals to be there to keep them going when they're little. And I'm going to be starting off this event with playing Landmark. I haven't streamed Landmark for a while, but I've been playing, and I have more than 70 giveaway items. I have a new PvP arena built and ready to play around with and test and hang out if people want to do that. I'm happy to do anything, do some races, do whatever, but I'm just going to be throwing items at people, and hopefully people come and hang out. I am not part of the SOE Extra Life team. I have my own team. I'm captain or the leader of the O Team's Extra Life team. I've been working really hard on this for a long time. Actually, our team existed long before the SOE Extra Life team did. But I hope that people will come hang out, and there are going to be plenty of other things that other people are doing hanging on with that, hanging out throughout the other day. I'm going to be playing some different games, so if you want to go visit somebody else, just make sure that tomorrow, if you're watching a stream, if they're not raising money for Extra Life, I would ask that you choose to be elsewhere. So, and if you're going to be streaming and you're not signed up for Extra Life, just do that now, so that I'm not directly attacking you and telling people to not go to your stream. So that's about all that I have. Let me look. Let's say Phantom X. You're also going to be doing some streaming for this event tomorrow with EQ Nexus. Tell us all about it.
Yep. Well, it's the same thing as you. We did join the SOE team, so we don't have our own. So it's going to be me and Shantir are going to be streaming. I actually will not be able to until much later. My wife works nights. I have 2 kids, so it'll be later. But we'll be giving stuff away. And much like you said, quite honestly, if you watch us, great. If not, just watch somebody and donate and participate. So. And if you can't donate, spread the word.
Yeah.
Is Geo still alive? Geo, you're up.
Well, according to my portrait, I'm not. Although I do have a pretty healthy beard.
That's an awesome beard.
I've been working
Yeah,
on it,
he
guys,
needed an upgrade.
just for TheoryForge. Actually, I would love to stream for Extra Life, and I was planning on it. I just haven't. I'm sure most of you guys have noticed that I have been absent for quite some time. Don't have a lot of the equipment that I need to be streaming, but I can't emphasize enough that it's a beautiful thing. Thank you, Tsagh, for setting up the whole the O Team section for this charity. It's a beautiful thing, and again, thanks for everybody else who's doing it on the SOE team. And I look forward to supporting your streams. So make sure you guys go out. It's my tidbit.
Yep. I mean, last year I raised $0.00, so I, wasn't the most successful Extra Life. So chances are this year I'm probably just gonna jump on with other people that are having something more successful and try to promote things that way. But definitely something that I'm gonna be having an eye on and helping promote as well for the various different groups that are going to be doing it. It's definitely pretty worthwhile cause, and of course, I'm going to be getting in a little bit of Landmark tomorrow. Not sure if that's going to be something that'll be Extra Life themed or not, but it's kind of a weird time. Nobody usually tunes in anyway, so probably set up the Extra Life stuff, but don't expect much. I'll probably must be hanging out with other folks for it. I'd love to see if anybody has builds that they make during Extra Life, though. Definitely hit me up. I'd love to tour my content and creations. Moving along.
I will definitely. I don't have anything planned tomorrow, so my goal is kind of, I've been with my own child coming recently. I've been kind of out of the community for a little bit, so I'm gonna make a huge effort to bounce around and visit people's streams and keep them lively and engage the chats. Being totally broke, I can't raise money, but I can hopefully incentivize people to raise, to make the experience fun and hopefully give them more reasons to donate other than it just being an amazingly good cause and a good thing to do for people, especially if you have kids, or you have family. Everybody, it doesn't even matter if you have kids. Like, this is huge. Like, it's just really, really important to, kids can't defend themselves, so we got to do it for them. So this is a big cause. I'm really behind it, and thanks everybody for watching the show. We appreciate you guys as an audience. We didn't get to set up any type of Extra Life thing for this show because we're kind of just a once a week thing, but as you can see, we're all supporting a lot of different areas in the community, and we're hoping that you guys as our audience and fans of the show will help support other places, and we've given you a lot of places to help out. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll be back next week. We have some big shows coming up with tech and optimizations coming in pretty soon. We're going to do a special show for that and have all 6 hosts on for that. And then we also have finally kind of got some responses back from having possible developers come on the show over the next month. So you guys definitely want to be here for those. We can speculate all we want, but those guys are going to be able to provide a ton of awesome information. So, but anyways, thanks you guys for watching. Participate tomorrow, hang out in people's streams, donate if you can, and have a lot of fun. We'll see you guys later.
All right, so talking about raising money for kids, not streaming Landmark currently, but has very much someone that most of you would know from being around the community. She was at SOE Live. Super Fancy Unicorn is starting a 24-hour Extra Life charity stream, so let's all go over there.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and I'll hopefully see a couple people tomorrow.